My work revolves around Kurdish politics and history. I'm interested in identity, ideas around nationhood, diaspora, and more recently in the last 2 or 3 years, specifically the relationship between Britain and Kurdistan. And I always feel like the lens through which I access this subject matter is like a very emotive one. So I think a lot about material and colour and light, and I use a lot of song and music and poetry, and I'm interested in like the performativity of politics itself. And so I'm always thinking of like ways that I can bring this out in a very like emotive and evocative way. I looked a lot at the relationship between Britain and Kurdistan when Britain politically occupied the region of Mesopotamia before the current nation states were established. And I was really interested in the decision-making process which led to the omission of Kurdistan. While I was doing this research, I came into the history of oil as being one of the driving forces for this. The sculpture, which is titled Baba Gurgur, is an embodiment of the Baba Gurgur Gasha, which was first struck in 1927. This was a really pivotal moment in terms of Britain's interest in oil in the region, which later culminated in the Red Line Agreement, which was Western colonial states' monopoly of oil in the Middle East. I wanted to recreate Baba Gurgur in the form of the Salvia spinosa flower, which is the only species of flower which grows on shale rocks in between the oil wells of Baba Gurgur. It's a really prolific flower. It's endemic to the region. It grows from North Africa to Afghanistan, and I really like that it grows in abundance and is as prolific as the oil beneath the ground was believed to be. The sculpture is fitted with an internal light to be evocative of the natural burning fire of Baba Gurgur, which has been burning for thousands of years. Another work in the exhibition is Sick Pink Sun, with a start date of 3 a.m. 14th of October 1927 with an undefined end date. And something that I came across a lot in my research was a lot of imagery of the landscape and the sky and the sun during bombings of oil wells. And a specific example would be in 2014 when ISIS bombed the Karaya oil fields in Mosul, and this created really toxic smoke plumes, and the sun was a really strange colour behind these clouds. So I really wanted to point to how pernicious and pervasive the effects of this history and current politics are, and my approach to the show was to have something that was very like elemental and monumental and very pared back and quite singular, I guess, in terms of like how I wanted to evoke this politics and history. And something that was really important as well was to not have any oil present or any sort of direct reference to it, but to basically show or to elaborate on the after effects and the traces and echoes of this history. I chose the title of conflagration because of its double meaning. A conflagration is a fire which is really difficult to put out, but also conflagration to mean war and conflict, and to point to the history of the oil industry, this history between Britain and Kurdistan and Iraq, and the ongoing conflict and intermittent wars where oil has been a really like decisive factor in that. So the sound piece, which is titled Naphtha Maqam, and naphtha is a derivative of crude oil. I've written the maqams, there are 6 of them, and they're lyrically English but melodically Kurdish. It's a sound piece which is about 55 minutes long, performed by Amal Saeed Kurda, who's a contemporary Kurdish singer, with some voiceover performed by myself of various excerpts from these archives which I visited. I touch on different moments in time. Something that was very important to me was to think about the elements of the show cross-spatially and cross-temporally. And so, for example, there are moments that hark back to the very first moment when Baba Gurgur was struck. This moment of, for example, 2014, which I mentioned, when ISIS bombed the Karaya oil fields. And also it ends with a moment far into the future where the oil begs to be reburied into the ground. Something that was really important to me was to show how the landscape and the materials that I was looking at were indifferent to the decisions that were being made about them. I didn't want to falsify any kind of defiance or resilience on behalf of the landscape, but to show that actually it will eventually outlive these decisions that were made about it and into an unknowable future that we don't yet know.